Anthony Herron is sponsored by Plumbers 911. Plumbing emergency, call the plumbing professionals. Available 24/7 at 1-833-PLUM-911. And by Bosch Power Tools, what hard workers deserve. And by Busey Bank, building business, growing wealth since 1868. Anthony Herron is on Twitter at Big Ant Herron. He is with us on the Score Hotline. Presented by Circa Resort and Casino, circalasvegas.com, and always twitch.tv/Chicago670 The Score. Hello, Anthony.
Hello, fellas. What's happening?
Happy Festivus. We out here just airing out our grievances, which the Bears make that easy to do on a weekly basis, right?
You haven't run out of grievances yet?
Nah, I will never run out of grievances, one. But also, I have to keep it simple, stupid, KISS. That's the motto we're rolling with for the rest of the Bears season, because there's no reason to get all up in arms about this, that, or the other.
I play on the HITS principle.
Well, I'm sure you do. I threw the acronym in because I know how much Dan likes acronyms. So if we're going to keep it simple, you okay with what happened yesterday as far as the only thing that I really care about right now, which is COE, Caleb over everything?
No. I was okay with Caleb. But for Caleb, for the Bears to become winners, they gotta show some roster depth, and they're not showing much roster depth right now. Now, taking the full season into context, how many of your veterans are as engaged as they would have been 2 months ago when they were playing poorly. How many of your young guys are as engaged? I mean, you got to show it. Like, this is where the opportunities. I was actually talking about this a bit yesterday on the post show. This is where this opportunity to show that you can and perhaps should be a part of the future that the Bears would presumably be hoping to build here, turn this thing into a winner, where these opportunities for Austin Booker, this matters. Like, it matters for Austin Booker to try to show some flashes here.
Stay on sides.
That would be a good start. And then when he stays on sides, like, I've seen Austin Booker hit his teammates as he's flying around the field wildly and chasing the foot. Like, he plays hard. He just seems to have no awareness of where the football is or where the blocking surface presents itself that he's supposed to be hitting. Or, he runs like he's magnetized to offensive tackle, runs directly into the tackle every time he comes out of his stance. He's running directly into a blocker to find somebody to try to out-wrestle, even though they outweigh him by 60 pounds, and he's not showcasing any legit power when he's doing it. Like, his football sensibilities need to evolve. And so these snaps matter for him in evaluating the game and just looking for flashes from an Austin Booker, from a Dominique Robinson. Where is Noah Sewell? Jack Sanborn. Exactly.
Sanborn got a bunch of snaps, and I was waiting for Ben Johnson to make Sanborn flip his hips.
He didn't need to, because he was making Tremaine Edmonds and Elijah Hicks and Jonathan Owens. He was making them look silly.
Tremaine Edmonds makes a little bit more money than him, right?
Quite a bit. So we know Tremaine Edmonds is going to be around. He's going to be part of this Bears future. He's got it. At this point in his career, Tremaine Edmonds needs to keep developing his awareness on the field. But for some of the young guys that are going to be viewed as the depth of this roster, that to me is where my eyes are trained right now. That's why it was disappointing to see the Karan Amagaji didn't dress in the game, despite the struggles on Monday Night Football. But if there is a developmental opportunity here, Braxton Jones leaves the lineup, Larry Borum goes in, but for Amagaji to not even be in uniform after starting and playing every snap the previous week, that's just surprising to me to miss the opportunity for at least that development chance that's there. It's just I don't know, the middle and bottom of this roster. This is the point in the season. This is the point in where this season has gone, where, yes, beyond Caleb, you got to figure out, man, do they have something like a base to build from it? And you're not seeing a lot of the base that's there for this Bears, the foundation that you want to be able to compile your roster on top of.
The problem that I have with some of that too is that the presumption of carryover. It's one thing if you're talking about individual tape and saying that some of these guys for their future have to objectively put into the system their performances. But it's another thing, nothing that happens here has any material effect on next year, with the exception of somebody being hurt. Really, because you can say, we want these faster starts. We got to prove that next year's a different team. All of these coaches are fired. The general manager might be fired.
I'm wondering how much roster holdover there will actually be.
Scott, what if Tyler Scott actually made some plays that would matter. It's great for Keenan Allen that he's got his 45-yard touchdown. Like the old man still got it.
Right?
But what about Tyler? If Tyler Scott looked good, yes, he would be here next year. Why wouldn't he be? He's a second-year player that they just drafted. They want him to be here. Even if everybody gets blown out, it's good for the Bears next year if Tyler Scott shows he can play football this year. And right now, we still haven't seen Tyler Scott do anything this year. So, yes, that would be beneficial to next year and beyond if you said that we have more that we know is a proven commodity at receiver for next season. Like, Keenan Allen ain't going to be here next year.
Right.
You know DJ Moore is going to be here. You know Roma Dunze is going to be here. If Tyler Scott and or Colin Johnson were doing something at the close of this year. Yes, he had a bad drop. So that's a bad thing because you're not going to get 53 new Bears on the roster next year. I don't care who the coach or the GM are. Some of these guys, a lot of these guys are going to be here. So, yeah, some of them are going to be different. You're going to have drafts. You're going to have different defensive philosophies. You're going to have different offensive scheme. A lot of these same dudes are going to be playing football for the Bears next year. So it would be beneficial to see some of them actually evolving into better and more productive players.
What is the realistic number or percentage of people that you can turn over from a year such as this to the next season, regardless of if there is, as you said, a new head coach and a new general manager? I mean, there are limits to what you can do, right?
Yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, and off the top of my head, I'm thinking like Tyler Scott is a second-year player, right? Who they just drafted, so they could cut him, but they're not going to want to. The draft capital has been expended by someone, and so if you don't bring Tyler Scott back next year, that means you're gonna draft a bunch of receivers because you don't have any returning receivers. You have Tyler Scott under contract right now. Colin Johnson, I don't know, his contract probably doesn't go beyond this season anyways. A practice squad guy early in the year. But the guys who are under contract, who you control their rights, just like we talk about in baseball, the ability to control the rights, who are unrestricted free agents, who are exclusive rights free agents, who don't have the ability to just go somewhere wherever they want to. The team would have the potential to match if they want to match and bring that guy back. The guys who are under some degree of contract control, they're going to at least likely be around going into camp. Yeah, there's a bunch of money to spend. You got to spend a whole lot of it up front. You know, this is where Ryan Poles and the way the roster has begun being constructed over the couple of years here, a lot of it has gone to skill position talent. Matt Eberflus was getting his DBs. You know, Ryan Poles was getting some receivers in here. To have that still be so open-ended, with where's your depth? Like, I'm confident the DB room is deep. Beyond that, receiver doesn't look deep. Running back sure doesn't look deep. We know the O-line and D-line need a bunch of work. So you can't just replace everyone. So what's the realistic percentage? It's hard to say until you know who the coaches are, who the GM is, how different will they be philosophically from what's in place. But I'd say a significant, just to use kind of a general description, a significant percentage of what's here right now, I believe will still be here next season.
You mentioned a new offensive system, though. Are you ruling out a new defensive system next year?
No, I mean, okay. Eric Washington didn't call in the defenses next year. Now, the thing is, to keep in mind with that, whoever the head coach is, whether you bring in an offensive guy or defensive guy, if the defensive system is different, which is 100% a possibility, like we don't know if they go and get Ben Johnson. We don't know what his defensive philosophy he's going to want as the head coach and the offensive coordinator, play caller is. He may want an odd front. He may want a 3-4 defense. He may want a more blitz-happy approach to things.
Or he's got a guy already. You know, some of these things, too, like in the back channels now, that's a question when you're talking to Ben Johnson's agent. Like, who's coming with him? Like, some of those handshake deals, some of those arrangements and provisional staffs are being put together already.
Yeah, very much so. And having that in mind with what the current construct of this roster is, how much of this would suit a philosophical change. Now, you can change, but it's one thing to say that, you know, we'll keep some degree. All right, they've been an even front. They've acquired guys who suit to some extent an even front. So we're going to stick with that defensive philosophy just because that's where the roster is. Maybe that's where Ryan Poles and the coach they hire, perhaps that's a part of the discussion that they have here and is, you know, where the hire may have some factor in that. Because if you say we're going to go to an odd front or we're going to go to a more of a blitzing philosophy, like Tremaine Edmonds isn't a good blitzer. You don't have other depth at linebacker who've shown that they are either. You know, where are you at on the D-line? we know they still need a better 3 technique, but beyond that, is Andrew Billings, all right, is he your no doubt 0 technique, but then you need a couple of heavy 5s. You need a couple of heavy alignment defensive ends. I feel like Montez Sweat could handle that. Who's your other end? Could DeMarcus Walker handle that? I'd say probably, but philosophically, the personnel that will now need to be here, you need a couple of teeth-kicking edge defenders in. You need pass rushers coming off each edge. So personnel-wise, there would be a lot of turnover if you go to a different defensive philosophy. It doesn't rule it out as a possibility, but that would enhance the amount of roster turnover that would be necessary to pull it off.
You mentioned Tremaine Edmonds. I'm wondering what your thoughts on his season are, because I'm frankly disappointed, especially knowing that Ryan Poles sent away Roquan Smith, and this was his answer, and it doesn't seem to be lining up for me. But maybe that's why I want your professional opinion.
I mean, trying to take the full context of Edmonds and Edwards into account, Edwards has outperformed his stature and his contract. Edmonds has underperformed his contract. But here's the thing. Just like I tell you guys with Montez Sweat, the Montez Sweat we've seen now that he's moving a little better in recent weeks, where he at least impacts the pocket. This is the Montez Sweat he's been throughout most of his career, a well above average player who's not amongst the 1%ers as a defensive end. And Tremaine Edmonds has always been the guy who's a very large, very athletic linebacker. He's never consistently been prone to the splash play. Tremaine Edmonds has never been a guy that takes the game over. So the hope, I would imagine, with each of them is that we're going to get Montez Sweat going into his prime, and his production will continue to uptick. But what is it? I think between what he did last season between the Commanders and the Bears is the only double-digit sack season he's ever had in his career, combining those numbers between the two teams. So he made history leading 2 different teams in sacks, but he's never been a sack machine when he's been in the National Football League.
My man.
Tremaine Edmonds has never been the guy who has, big-time TFLs and forced fumbles and, is this guy who you just can't run it between the tackles because Tremaine Edmonds is there at the second level wrecking shop. Or, again, I'm not trying to make it sound like either one of these guys is not good football players, just like Cole Kmet is a good football player. But the difference is, like Cole Kmet, you paid Cole Kmet like a good above-average tight end. You paid Montez Sweat like one of the elite defenders in football. You paid Tremaine Edmonds like one of the elite linebackers in football. Neither guy has ever really shown that consistently. So their production has never consistently equaled that physical potential that's there. Tremaine Edmonds is an amazing athlete, but his sense, his sort of, I guess, football IQ, to use that term, like his playmaking, intuitive, sort of nature for sniffing out the football and finding the interception, forcing the fumble. He's never had that type of splash production consistently as a player. So this is the version of Tremaine Edmonds that was there in Buffalo for the majority of his time there too. He makes a bunch of tackles. Occasionally you're like, wow, look how athletic he is running that guy down in the open field. But as far as somebody who just diagnoses the run and then triggers in the A gap to get a big tackle for loss on a 3rd or a 4th down, that's not who he's ever been.
Yeah, I understand that. And that's why I asked you, because my thing with this is, hey, if you're a general manager and you're looking to sign guys, you might pay a little bit more because that salary cap is going up in subsequent years. And that might be a factor for Ryan Poles. But otherwise, I'm looking for Ryan Poles wins, and I don't see a lot of wins right now. And I know in the midst of what could be an 11-game losing streak, it's easy for me to say that than it would be if they were, say, a 500 team. Mm-hmm. But I'm just trying to come up with things outside of the big trade that obviously got the most important part, which is the quarterback, and say, yes, I can definitely say he got it done there, as opposed to like these 3rd-round picks there now. As you look in retrospect, what they look like, hindsight is 20/20. I understand that. But if we're evaluating Ryan Poles, you got to look at the pros and you got to look at the cons. And I'm not coming up with as many pros as I thought I would at this point in the season, at the beginning, the outset of and the offseason of last year.
The safety net is that there's still a lot of cap space for this squad right now. And so even though Tremaine Edmonds is not, and I said it at the time, like Tremaine Edmonds isn't the football player Roquan Smith is, but he's a big athletic guy, and maybe within this scheme they can continue to kind of, develop more production out of him, more on-ball production. Remember the conversation we were having about Jalen Johnson a couple of seasons back, where it's obvious. Like, the league respects him as one of the top corners in football. The production for Jalen Johnson always showed up more on film, where he was just gloved up on a receiver, just in the hip pocket of everybody. The rare times he got thrown at, it was usually a pass deflection, but the interception numbers weren't there. And he wasn't like Charles Tillman, where he was getting the takeaways and the forced fumbles and those things that really made him elite. But you could see the on-film production, and then it equated to more interception production last season. That's not the case with Tremaine Edmonds. So a good football player, but there is cap space. So how do you enhance what's there between Edmonds, between Sweat, between some of these other guys that you're hoping you'll get more out of? I mean, part of the hope would have been Javon Dexter, Zach Pickens, and to be fair, Zach Pickens, I think, may have had his best game as a Chicago Bear yesterday. Still, how impactful was that even in a game where you still give up 30-plus points to an opponent again? But it was nice to see him flashing in a way that he hadn't really flashed previously. But you're looking for more from the middle and bottom of this roster, and then it doesn't feel like there's this chasmous miss on some of the guys that are getting the biggest money if the whole scope of the Bears defense is performing at a high level, as it did earlier in the season. Like, even when Montez Sweat was limping around more early in the year than he was now, but the whole defense was playing well and the opposing quarterback was being impacted and the DBs had everybody gloved up, then it didn't feel like there was this big missing element as much. Now they're giving up points, they're giving up drives. Now it showcases a bit more where, all right, if you're not deep, then your best need to be performing at an elite level. And we're not seeing elite level production from any of the guys at the top of their roster.
You didn't even bring up the decision that they may want to make on Tyrique Stevenson. Who knows where he fits in post Hail Mary play with his discipline questions, execution questions, as talented as he is. I don't know what it says. And the fact that he walked out of practice when they dared to punish him for his misdeed.
He just had to gather his thoughts.
That's fair. I think that is more than fair. Where I'm torn on Tyrique Stevenson, and, yesterday was another game where he seemed to have a couple of nice moments, seemed to have a couple of boneheaded moments, and that's kind of that roller coaster ride you get with Tyrique. It's a defense, I was talking to you guys about this a little bit before, it's a defense that doesn't seem to have kind of that spark plug, that feisty kind of little pistol starter type of guy. There's not many of those on that defense, and I feel like Tyrique provides that and also can provide some on-ball production and playmaking as well. But he's the guy that when things are going awry, you can benefit from his feisty temperament, but it can also be a detriment to you as well, if he picks up some silly penalty. Now, yesterday it was Jameson Williams who picks up this silly penalty, flipping the ball at him, but then Williams responds after that, just making everybody look silly in the open field and having the 82-yard touchdown. So, what is your level of production that makes it worthwhile to kind of put up with some of your immaturities? You better make some plays afterwards if your immaturity is going to show up in some of these circumstances also. So it's got to be balanced out. But I have yet to, with a second-year player, just like, not all out on Tyler Scott yet, and he's certainly not the football player Tyrique Stevenson even is. But I'm not all out on Tyrique Stevenson, but the questions are fair about that because, again, it's a guy where you're wondering how much more production is there. We've seen flashes. We've seen games. Like his last few weeks of the regular season last year, there was no more productive defender. On the top defense in football, Tyrique Stevenson was the most productive over those closing weeks last season. And now this year, you've ridden that roller coaster with him, and it feels like there is certainly with the immaturity, there's been more down than up. So I'd be surprised if the Bears were out on a second-round pick, year 2 in the league, who's shown both ends of that spectrum because, again, you can't just replace everybody. This is too expensive. There's a finite amount of rosters, and there's a finite amount of potential elite level talent. So Tyrique Stevenson is still at a point in his development where if the Bears move on, somebody else is going to look to snatch him up because between the physicality, the temperament, and the playmaking he's shown, he's going to be really enticing for someone else. My guess is he'll continue to be here in Chicago.
We've got more with Anthony Herron coming up, specifically some talk about Caleb Williams and how we interpret some of the counting stats and some of the rate stats about when he's compiling this and what those mitigating factors may mean in his evaluation. All that and more straight ahead with Big Ant on The Score. You're listening to a Plumbers 911 Football Monday presented by Bosch Power Tools and Busey Bank. And if you're looking for something to do on Sunday, boy, have I got it for you. stop by and say hello to Layla Rahimi and this man, Anthony Herron, at Rally House, Wrigleyville, from 9 a.m. to noon across the street from Wrigley Field. Layla and Anthony are broadcasting live from Rally House. You can enter to win a $25 gift card. Oh, wow. Rally House has the best selection of Blackhawks and Blues merchandise for the outdoor classic, from jerseys or sweaters to knit hats and even hand warmers to hoodies.
They even got the away team?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a big deal. It's a national thing where you do these big outdoor hockey events. Anthony, enjoy. It sounds like a fun time.
This will be my first time at Rally House. Very much looking forward to that. Not only will I get to talk sports with Layla Rahimi, but good to be out there in these streets interacting with the people.
Illinois, Notre Dame, and the Blackhawks.
They may ask you about they may ask you about Matt Eberflus's absence and how much that's affected what's now been the absolute worst defense in the NFL the last 3 weeks now? 2 weeks? I can't remember how long it's been. It's been bad though, Ant.
Yeah, it has been. And I mean, I don't know if warning is the right word, but before Eberflus got fired, again, I wasn't trying to make the case, just whether it was me
you
talking
just
about
letting us know what might happen, right?
Yeah, here's what we got to worry about when they fire Flus, because you fire that guy, and yes, he is a good defensive coordinator who has shown he is not a good head coach. So to be relieved of his duties as the head coach, all right, great, good call. He's earned that. But unfortunately, that means you'll have to promote an unproven defensive coordinator to call the defenses, and the unproven offensive coordinator who has shown some signs as the offensive coordinator. He hadn't been doing that very long. Folks going to get a bilk on him. But then also, he's probably going to be promoted to become the head coach. What does that mean? That distribution of assets for the coaching staff will be very difficult to manage, because not only are you just losing two coaches, you're effectively losing three coaches in that case, between Waldron and the two roles that Eberflus occupied. So, yeah, I'm anticipating a lot of questions about that. In addition to, when I showed up, we went and visited Santa Claus the other day, and we walk into the shop, and one of Santa's elves walks in and says, "Oh, bleep," when they see me. Like, wait a minute. What did I do? You're the Bears guy. Oh, well, do you mean, my wife's like, do you mean, oh, Snow? You see our 7-year-old with us here? Oh, yeah, sorry about that. All right,
wait, you got profane elves?
Wow, I'm so mad.
We had some foul-mouthed elves.
What's going on here?
That's what the Bears have done to people. They see somebody who covers the Bears, like, oh, bleep. Like, wait a minute. We're supposed to be in like Fantasyland right now. Come on.
And then Bishop's like, hey, I heard the elf say it.
Exactly.
I can say it. I'm just talking an elf.
I'm gonna let Dan get his questions off, because I have other questions that are not about you being the Bears guy, but about you being the college football guy. But I'm gonna let you.
Okay.
All right. Well, let me ask this first. These are the hard numbers right now, Caleb Williams. These are his stats through 15 games, 15 starts. It's amazing this dude is ambulatory, because first of all, he's been sacked a league high 60 times. The sack percentage is 10.62. So 1 out of every 10 dropbacks, he's on the ground. So think about that when I also tell you he's completed 62.2% of his passes for 3,271 yards, 19 touchdowns, and 5 interceptions with a passer efficiency rating of 89.3.
Okay.
However, in recent days, he's done a lot when the Bears are already losing by a lot. They're down 20-0. And
of course they're throwing the football.
Of course. Not only are they throwing the football, but they're throwing it against defenses that are happy to let you march down the middle of the field and burn up time. And so I know in basketball there are metrics that strip out some of these situations. Like when you go to cleaning the glass, and there's only stuff like 5-on-5, or how do they phrase it? Hockey, it's 5-on-5, but this would be when it's close. Yeah, there's a certain there's a certain disparity of score situation where they'll say these are material times on the court that they measure. So how do you look at what Caleb Williams is doing? You've got those numbers in front of you. What's meaningful when they keep losing all these games?
Well, you guys know I'm Captain Context, and I would say that yesterday's 0 interception game, yesterday's game of significant yardage was different. I felt like it was one of Caleb's better games this season, one of his more consistent games with being decisive as a passer and being accurate. He certainly had a couple of those moments of inaccuracy, but overall, in the 40 pass attempts of the game, I thought it was one of the more consistently accurate games he had. And, we've been talking about the interception streak a decent bit here in recent weeks. Yesterday's game and, being proud of the interception streak. Jonathan Vilma was talking about it a bit during the broadcast yesterday, his conversations with Caleb, and sensing a certain degree of pride in not throwing picks. I get that. That's good. You don't want to throw the ball to the other team. The issue is there have been games where Caleb hasn't thrown interceptions that he's also not throwing it to his team either. So when he's back there like patting the ball or massaging the ball extensively like some kind of kinesiologist, that's an issue. That's led to a bunch of Caleb sacks. Yesterday, that wasn't the case. He got sacked twice. Was he under some duress at times? Sure. But that's where that combination of his improvisational skills, his ability to extend the play, but also being willing and showing the ability to stand in the pocket, decipher the defense, and just get the ball out of his hands. He did that really effectively and consistently yesterday. Now, in the end, it only led to 17 points. But at least within that context, the game that he threw 0 interceptions, the games that he throws 0 interceptions and takes 7 sacks, those games bother me when he's just in the pocket holding the football. So some of that ends up being on the O-line. Some of that ends up being on Caleb. And it's kind of difficult sometimes to sift through how much of it is the fault of the guys up front, how much of it is the fault of the young quarterback who's holding the football forever, how much of it is the receivers not getting open, how much of it is drops and he's not confident in trying to feed the ball into tight windows. All those things are normally factors in yesterday's game. I just like the way that Caleb pretty consistently hit his back foot and cut the ball loose. Caleb tends to operate, it's fair to say at this point, certainly in the context of just his rookie season. Hopefully he develops out of this, but right now he operates best as a passer in moments of desperation, whether that's at the end of a half, like 58 seconds on the clock. Caleb, we're going to trust you. He said before, Thomas Brown tells him in moments like that, go be Superman. His version of Superman was ripping a 25-yarder to DJ Moore, and then on the very next snap, ripping a touchdown bomb to Keenan Allen, who shockingly got behind the defense. And he threw a great ball on a hole shot, up the sideline, behind the corner, in front of the safety. He hit his back foot and just ripped a dot.
And that's
Keenan
a
Allen,
throw that he missed last week.
Precisely.
It's the same throw.
Yes. To the other side of the field, which some quarterbacks, and I haven't seen the numbers, Caleb throwing left versus Caleb throwing right. I'm recalling more highlights of Caleb throwing the ball more effectively, throwing right than left. But again, that's just very anecdotal, just me off the top of my head, sort of rambling here. So I don't know the numbers, Caleb throwing left versus Caleb throwing right. But yes, very similar route, very similar pass attempt. But the one yesterday throwing to the right side of the field to Keenan Allen, he put it right on the money. And the convergence angle, the leverage of the defenders was a little bit different, one pass versus the next, and the area of the field they were on. But it was a gorgeous pass that he threw to Keenan Allen. We've seen him complete on fourth downs to Rome Odunze, exceptional finesse passes in moments of desperation. And we saw even yesterday, that context of the end of the first half, 58 seconds, that is a moment of desperation where the clock is our enemy, but we do want to go try to get some points. So, Caleb, you can't pat the football. Caleb, you can't sit around and wait. Caleb, you've got to be decisive and get it out of your hands. And when he's in that mode, he's shown special traits. How do you get more of that out of him more consistently? That'll be part of the task for his continued evolution as an NFL QB.